It was supposed to be a day of celebration, a wedding, something to bring everyone together. But as soon as I stepped into the venue, I could feel it. Something was off. The air was thick with tension, like a storm was brewing, and no one had told me what the forecast looked like. I adjusted my tie, trying to shake the feeling of unease that had crept into my chest. The hall was grand, filled with the soft glow of chandeliers and the sweet scent of roses in the air. But instead of feeling joy, I felt the weight of the moment pressing down on me, like the walls themselves were closing in. I found Tom, my best friend, standing nervously near the front. His hands were shaking, and I noticed the deep lines of worry etched across his forehead. Normally, Tom was the life of the party, always cracking jokes, always at ease. But today, there was nothing easy about him. His eyes met mine, but there was something different in them, a flicker of something I couldn't place. "You good, man?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though my heart was racing. "Yeah," he said, but his voice was tight, strained. He looked away quickly, glancing toward the back of the room where Emily, his bride-to-be, was making last-minute adjustments to her dress. I frowned, sensing the shift in his demeanor. Tom had always been the kind of guy to wear his emotions on his sleeve, but right now he was shutting me out. I couldn't help but wonder if something was wrong between them, something no one was talking about. Just then, Emily approached, and I couldn't help but notice how she was practically radiating anxiety. Her eyes were wide, her hands fidgeting with the fabric of her dress. She kept tugging at it, adjusting it like she was trying to make it fit, but the more she pulled, the worse it seemed to get. "My dress doesn't fit right," she muttered, her voice tight with frustration. "It's too tight here, too loose there. I can't do anything right." I could feel my stomach tighten. The bride was upset, and it was clear that this wasn't just about the dress. It was like there was an unspoken undercurrent between her and Tom, something bubbling just below the surface. I exchanged a glance with my sister, Hannah, who stood beside me. Her lips curled into a small, knowing smile, but there was no warmth in it. Emily looked around, desperate for reassurance. "Isn't it awful?" she asked, her eyes darting from person to person. "Emily," Tom said softly, stepping forward, "it's fine. You look amazing. Don't worry about the dress." But she wasn't convinced. She shot him a glare, a cold, sharp look that sent a shiver down my spine. "I can't even look at myself in this thing," she snapped, and the room went completely still. My hands trembled as I clenched my phone, trying to distract myself. My thoughts were racing. Why was she so upset? Was this just about the dress? Or was there something else, something deeper, that no one was talking about? Before I could dwell on it any longer, Hannah stepped forward, cool and collected, as if she had been waiting for the right moment to speak. Her eyes narrowed as she glanced at Emily. "You're lucky you even have a dress," she said flatly. The words hung in the air, heavy and charged. The room went silent, and even the hum of the background chatter seemed to fade into nothing. Everyone turned toward Hannah, stunned by her bluntness. I could feel my heart rate quicken. What was she doing? This wasn't the time for her sarcasm. Emily's face flushed red, her jaw tightening. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped the fabric of her dress so tightly that her knuckles turned white. But before anyone could react, Hannah walked over to the table where gifts were piled up, pulled out a small, wrapped box, and handed it to Emily. It felt like the entire room was holding its breath as Emily took the box, her hands trembling. She looked at Hannah, confusion clouding her face. I felt my stomach twist. What was going on? What was in that box? As Emily unwrapped it, the silence grew deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Then she opened the package, revealing a plastic bag. The room froze. Emily stared at the bag in disbelief, her eyes wide. She looked up at Hannah and then down at the bag again, as if she couldn't comprehend what she was seeing. The tension in the air was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Hannah said nothing, just stood there, watching. Everyone waited, their eyes locked on Emily, who was now holding a small, folded note that had been inside the bag. The moment felt surreal, like the world had paused, holding its breath. The note in Emily's hand, simple and plain, read, "You're not the bride." I couldn't breathe. My heart dropped into my stomach. The room had gone from silence to complete chaos in an instant. Emily's face drained of color, her lips trembling. But before anyone could say a word, she collapsed into tears, the note still clutched tightly in her hand. I stood there, frozen, my mind racing to catch up with the chaos unfolding in front of me. The note. "You're not the bride." It echoed in my head over and over again, and yet I couldn't wrap my mind around what was happening. What did it even mean? Emily's tears were coming fast now, her sobs racking her body as she looked at Tom, as if she was waiting for an explanation. But Tom, the man who was supposed to be marrying her, just stood there. His face was pale, his eyes wide with shock, his lips trembling as if he couldn't find the words to explain himself. "Tom?" Emily gasped between sobs, her voice barely a whisper. "What is this? What does this mean?" But he didn't answer. Instead, his gaze flickered to Hannah, and for a split second I saw something in his eyes, something that shouldn't have been there. Guilt. It wasn't just a flicker. It was an unmistakable flash of guilt. Why did his eyes shift away from me when they met mine? Why did they dart toward my sister like that? In that moment, something deep inside me clicked, and I felt the weight of the situation begin to settle like a brick in my chest. It was then that I understood. Tom wasn't the man I thought he was. But what did that mean for Emily? For me? For all of us? Emily wasn't the bride. My stomach twisted again. It didn't make sense. I glanced at my sister, still standing there with her cool, detached expression, a little too calm in the face of all this turmoil. "You've got to be kidding me," I murmured under my breath, but my words were drowned out by the escalating noise in the room. Whispers, shuffling feet, gasping voices. People were talking, pointing, speculating, and all of a sudden I was no longer a guest at a wedding. I was trapped in the middle of something far darker and more complicated than I ever could have imagined. I turned back to Tom, desperate for some kind of explanation, something that could help me make sense of what was happening. "Tom, what the hell is going on? What is this about?" His eyes flickered toward Emily, then to Hannah, and he opened his mouth like he was about to speak, but no sound came out. It was like the words had frozen in his throat. "Tom, answer me," I said louder now, the frustration and confusion in my voice cutting through the noise. But nothing. Finally, Tom's lips parted, but his voice was barely audible, shaky. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He didn't mean for it to happen like this. What the hell did that even mean? What had happened? I looked around the room, and for the first time, I noticed the uncomfortable stares, the sideways glances, the way everyone was trying to avoid making eye contact. Tom continued, his words tumbling out in a rush. "It wasn't supposed to go this way. Emily, His voice cracked, and he stopped abruptly, as if trying to gather himself. But I knew. I could see it now in the way he was looking at my sister, how his shoulders were tense, how he couldn't seem to meet anyone's gaze for too long. "You've been seeing someone else, haven't you?" Emily's voice shattered through the air, barely audible but so full of pain and disbelief that it seemed to freeze time. Her tear-streaked face twisted in agony, and she reached out, her hands trembling as she grasped Tom's arm. "You've been lying to me, haven't you?" Tom opened his mouth to respond, but the words never came. It was as if he was incapable of speaking, like everything inside him had locked up the moment the truth was revealed. I could see it in his eyes, though. The shame, the guilt. He was caught. And then, like the dam breaking, the truth spilled out. Emily wasn't the only one who had been blindsided by this betrayal. It was me, too. It was everyone in that room. Tom started, but his voice failed him again. "I couldn't do it anymore. I was going to tell you, but I thought I could keep it a secret. I thought I could hide it, but she knows, Emily. She knows." His words hung in the air, heavy, suffocating, as the room shifted beneath my feet. The world tilted, and my thoughts scrambled to make sense of it all. She knows? Who was she? Before I could ask, Hannah spoke, her tone sharp and unwavering. "I knew this was coming," she said flatly, as if none of this was surprising to her. "I've been telling you, Tom. I've been telling you to be honest, to face the truth. But you wouldn't listen. You thought you could hide everything behind a lie. And now here we are." My mind was reeling, trying to grasp the magnitude of what was happening. Tom had been seeing someone else. Emily wasn't the bride after all. And Hannah had known. She'd known all along. The room was silent once again, the weight of the revelation settling over us all like a thick fog. And then I saw it, the flicker of something in Tom's eyes as he glanced at my sister. He didn't just feel guilty. He was terrified. The truth was out now, and there was no going back. The silence in the room was deafening. I could feel the tension thick in the air, like we were all suspended in time, waiting for someone to say something, anything, that would make sense of the chaos we'd just witnessed. But nothing made sense. Tom stood there, paralyzed, and Emily's sobs were the only sound that filled the empty space between us. I glanced over at Hannah, who stood off to the side, arms crossed and looking as unfazed as ever. She had the kind of calm that made everything around her feel more intense. Her eyes met mine, and for a split second, I saw something that looked almost like satisfaction. It was subtle, but it was there. What was she so calm about? She had known. She had known all along what was happening with Tom and Emily. And now, it was like she was waiting for the fallout, waiting for everyone else to catch up to her version of the truth. I turned back to Emily, who was still standing, trembling, clutching onto Tom's arm with desperate hands. Her face was a mask of disbelief, her mascara streaking down her cheeks as the realization slowly crept in. "How long, Tom? How long have you been lying to me?" Tom couldn't look her in the eye. His gaze dropped to the floor, his lips quivering. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. I could see his chest rise and fall as he tried to breathe, but it was like he was suffocating on his own guilt. "How long?" Emily repeated, her voice louder this time, cracking with emotion. She sounded like a person breaking into 1,000 pieces, and I couldn't bear it. I felt like I was suffocating too, trapped in the middle of something I didn't know how to fix. I don't know," Tom mumbled finally. "I never meant for it to go this far." "Never meant for it to go this far?" Emily's voice broke, her words laced with anger now. "Tom, you lied to me. You pretended. You made me believe that we were building something real. And now I find out it was all a lie?" Her hands clenched at her sides, her nails digging into her palms as she tried to steady herself. But the more she tried to hold it together, the more the cracks in her composure showed. I could feel my heart aching for her. I'd never seen Emily like this. Broken. Vulnerable. She wasn't the perfect bride in a fairy tale dress anymore. She was just a woman who had been betrayed by the person she loved most. And for all the harshness of this moment, I couldn't help but feel a deep sorrow for her. But it wasn't just Emily I was worried about. Tom, too, was a mess. His face had gone completely pale, and his hands were trembling. It was like he was unraveling before my eyes, and I couldn't look away. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "You're telling me this now?" Emily demanded, her voice rising, shaking with disbelief. She took a step back from him, her eyes searching his face like she was looking for something, anything, that could explain this betrayal. But there was nothing left. She turned to my sister then, her face twisted in a mix of hurt and confusion. "What about you, Hannah? You knew, didn't you? You knew all along that he was seeing someone else. You just let me walk into this knowing that I was making a fool of myself." Hannah didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. "You've been making a fool of yourself for months," she said flatly. "It was obvious. I'm not the one who told you, because you had to figure it out on your own. You needed to see it with your own eyes, Emily. Some people need that kind of clarity." Emily recoiled like she had been slapped, her eyes wide with shock. You think this is funny?" Her voice was low, dangerous now, a simmering rage bubbling beneath the surface. Hannah's lips quirked into a small, cynical smile. "I don't think it's funny. I think it's the truth. And the truth is, you were never really in control of this situation, were you?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My sister, the one person I thought I could always count on to have my back, was standing there practically enjoying the chaos she had set into motion. It was like she was waiting for someone to wake up, to finally see the truth she had known all along. "Is this what you wanted?" I asked her, my voice thick with disbelief. "Is this what you thought was going to happen?" Hannah looked at me, her gaze steady, unfazed. I wanted nothing more than for Emily to wake up and stop being so blind to what was in front of her. This was always coming. You just couldn't see it. The room was silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. The kind that pressed down on your chest, suffocating you with the weight of everything unspoken. Emily turned back to Tom, her face a mix of pain and anger. She shook her head, almost as if she was trying to physically shake off the reality of what had just been revealed. I took a step forward, wanting to do something, anything to help. But I didn't know how. There was no fixing this. Nothing anyone said would undo the hurt or the betrayal. "Tom," Emily whispered, her voice raw. "I thought I knew you. I thought I knew everything about you, but I don't. I don't know you at all." Those words hit harder than anything I'd heard all day, and I knew then that everything had changed. This wasn't just a moment of betrayal. This was the end of something, an end I didn't think I'd ever witness. The room felt like it was shrinking, the walls closing in as Emily's words sank deep into everyone's hearts. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing against my chest, almost suffocating me. It wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the end of something bigger. Trust, love, everything that had once held this group of people together. Tom stood there, unmoving. His face was like a ghost, drained of color, his lips trembling as if he was trying to speak. But nothing came out. I could feel his desperation, his regret. But it wasn't enough. Not now. Not after everything. Emily looked at him, her eyes raw, puffy from crying. "I gave you everything, Tom. Everything." She was shaking now, her hands curling into fists by her sides as she struggled to keep herself steady. But every word she spoke seemed to unravel her even more. "And you betrayed me. You lied." For months her voice broke on the last word, and I watched as she crumpled in front of him, I wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but it felt like anything I did would be too little, too late. There were no words that could fix this. Not for her, not for Tom, and certainly not for anyone in the room. "Emily, please." Tom's voice cracked, his body shaking. "I never meant for it to go this far. I didn't know how to tell you." I wanted to shout at him, to ask how he could have been so blind, so selfish. But I stayed silent, watching the train wreck unfold before me. I had never seen Tom like this, never seen him so broken, so desperate to take back everything he'd done. Emily looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and sorrow. "You didn't know how to tell me?" She scoffed, shaking her head, her lips quivering. "You think that makes this easier? You think that makes it okay?" She turned to the crowd, her eyes sweeping over everyone, and for the first time, I could see how utterly alone she felt. "I trusted him," she whispered, almost to herself. "I trusted him, and now I have nothing." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it hit like a tidal wave. I could see the pain in her eyes, the realization that everything she thought she knew about love, about trust, had been shattered in an instant. She stepped back, away from Tom, and I could hear her ragged breathing, the sound of her heart breaking with every breath. The whole room was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen, anything that could possibly make this right. But there was no making this right. Not now. "You're a coward, Tom," Emily said, her voice barely audible, but the bitterness in her words was sharp enough to cut through the air. "You didn't just cheat on me. You cheated me of everything, my trust, my love, my future. You took it all, and now I'm standing here, alone, with nothing but the pieces of a life that doesn't even make sense anymore." Tom's face crumpled, as if her words were a physical blow. "Emily, please, I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you," he said, stepping toward her, his hands reaching out. I thought I could fix it, that I could make everything work. But I was wrong. I'm so sorry." She recoiled from him, her face twisted with hurt. "Sorry? Sorry doesn't fix this, Tom." Her voice cracked again as she wiped her eyes, her body trembling. "Sorry doesn't bring back the trust. Sorry doesn't bring back the love." I could feel the sadness in the room, the collective ache that came from witnessing something so painful, so raw. I couldn't imagine what it felt like to be in Emily's shoes right now. Her whole world was crumbling, piece by piece, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The silence stretched on, and I could feel myself caught between two worlds. One of shattered illusions, where everything I thought I knew about love and loyalty was crumbling, and another where I was still trying to make sense of it all. My head was spinning, my heart pounding in my chest, but I stayed silent, not knowing what to say, not knowing what was right. Then, finally, Emily spoke again, her voice breaking through the heavy silence. "I want you to leave, Tom. I want you to leave. Now!" It was as if the words had been ripped from her, raw and full of anger, but also full of finality. She wasn't asking anymore. She wasn't pleading for him to stay. She was done. Tom stood there, unable to move, his face stricken with regret. He opened his mouth to speak again, but the words never came. He just stood there, frozen, staring at the woman he had destroyed. I could see him now, really see him, as he stood there, broken, defeated. And for a moment I wondered if this was the end for him too. Had he lost everything? Had he destroyed the only good thing in his life? Slowly, Tom turned and walked away, his footsteps heavy on the floor as he left the room without another word. Emily stood there, her body trembling, her face pale from the tears, the hurt, the loss. And for a moment all I could do was watch, helpless as she let go of everything. The love, the trust, the life they were supposed to share, gone in an instant. But something about her face, the way she stood tall despite everything, made me think that maybe, just maybe, she'd survive this. She'd rebuild. And even though the pain was fresh and sharp, I knew this wasn't the end for her. It was just the beginning of something new. As the room began to fill with murmurs and whispers, I stayed where I was, my heart heavy with the weight of it all. Nothing would ever be the same again. Not for any of us, the door slammed shut behind Tom, and the room seemed to exhale collectively, as if everyone had been holding their breath waiting for the storm to pass. But the storm wasn't over. Not by a long shot. It was just beginning to unravel, piece by piece. I looked at Emily, standing there in the middle of the room, her hands trembling as she wiped away the last of her tears. She was trying to steady herself, but I could see the cracks in her armor. This wasn't just a broken engagement. This was a life shattered, a future ripped away, leaving nothing but the rubble of what she had once believed in. Her eyes were unfocused, staring straight ahead, but I could tell she wasn't really seeing anything. She was lost in her own thoughts, drowning in the gravity of everything that had just happened. Her chest heaved with every breath, and for a moment, all I could do was watch from the sidelines, wishing there was something I could do to take away the pain that seemed to have swallowed her whole. I stepped forward slowly, not wanting to disturb the fragile silence she had wrapped herself in, but knowing she couldn't stay like this. Not forever. Emily. My voice was soft, hesitant. She turned to face me, her eyes red-rimmed but still burning with a kind of quiet fury. "I don't even know who I am anymore," she whispered, almost to herself. Her words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with defeat. I trusted him. I thought I was doing everything right, everything I was supposed to, and now look where I am. I'm just alone. Her voice cracked, and she wrapped her arms around herself, as if trying to hold together the shattered pieces of her own heart. I wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but I knew that no words could fix this. No words could undo what had just happened. "You're not alone," I said, the words slipping out before I could even think about them. She met my gaze then, her eyes searching mine, looking for something, anything that could restore the faith she had lost. "How can you say that?" Her voice was trembling, vulnerable. "How can you say that when I don't even know who I am anymore? Tom was everything to me, and now I'm nothing." The sadness in her voice was palpable, and I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. I wished there was something more I could say to make it better, but the truth was, I didn't know how. I had never felt such an overwhelming weight in my chest before. All I could do was stand there and try to be a shoulder for her, even if I didn't have all the answers. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you really are," I said, feeling the weight of those words as I spoke them. It wasn't some grand revelation. It was a quiet truth, one I had learned through my own struggles. "You're not nothing, Emily. You're just finding yourself again." She looked at me, her face softening for a moment as she let my words sink in. But the anger didn't completely fade from her eyes. Not yet. She still had so much to process, so much to come to terms with. But I could see a flicker of something in her, a spark of strength, something that had been buried beneath all the hurt. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice a little steadier. But I could tell she wasn't thanking me for any grand advice. She was thanking me for being here, for being someone who could offer her a tiny piece of solace in a world that felt completely upside down. "You're gonna be okay," I told her, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it myself. I wanted to believe it, I had to believe it. Because if she didn't believe it, how could she ever move on from this? The seconds felt like hours as she stood there, her shoulders still hunched with the weight of everything that had just unfolded. The room around us was slowly filling with murmurs and the rustling of people trying to figure out what to do next. But I couldn't tear myself away from Emily. Not now. "Tom may have destroyed your future with him, Emily," I said, my voice firm. "But that doesn't mean you don't have one. You're stronger than this. You just have to trust that it'll come when you least expect it." Her lips trembled slightly, as if she wanted to argue, to deny it. But instead she just nodded once, weakly, as if she were trying to convince herself more than anyone else. It was a small, fragile gesture, but I could see that it meant something. It meant that, somewhere inside, she was beginning to believe in the possibility of something beyond the pain. "You're right," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can't just let this be the end of me." I saw the first flicker of hope in her eyes, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I believed her. She wasn't just going to crumble. She wasn't just going to let Tom's betrayal be the final chapter of her story. She was going to fight. She was going to rebuild. And even though I didn't know where this would go, or what the future would hold, I knew one thing for certain. Emily wasn't alone. Not anymore. Not with people like me who cared. Not with the strength she was beginning to find within herself. "Let's get out of here," I said, my voice soft but steady. "You don't have to do this alone." She looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing her options, before finally nodding. And together, we walked out of that room, leaving behind the wreckage of what was supposed to be a beautiful day, but knowing that the future, no matter how uncertain, was still waiting for us. For her. And as we walked, I couldn't help but believe that even in the darkest moments, there was always a way forward. Sometimes, all you had to do was take the first step.